And unsweet. I only drink unsweet.
Yeah. See, I don't.
Oh, don't you? I only drink unsweet.
No, like this is like killing me because there's one over there that says made with pure cane sugar. You know how tempting it is to grab that thing right now.
You have to go roll it behind the counter. You can't see it.
Or I could switch the
Hey,
labels and then just play ignorant.
I think we do a half of that.
There's no half left.
But it's not even like it's not even the middle, like mildly sweet. It's like cane sugar, you know, it goes from like unsweetened to cane sugar.
Okay,
But you know, the kids.
why don't we now move on to our next item? And I would encourage everyone, since we're doing this on the broadcast, be sure to speak into the microphone. But our next thing will be stormwater and erosion control discussion. And Michael Mathis will make a presentation and,
Mayor, there's some minutes to approve.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. It is the approval of the September 19th work session minutes. Do we have any changes or corrections? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Thank you. Now we'll move on to the stormwater and erosion control discussion. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So not really a presentation. I provided obviously two different memos that were in your workshop agendas. One addressed the erosion sediment control, the other one was for stormwater. The intent for both of those was basically to provide a little background to both the different ordinances and what our code says, kind of what we do if someone violates and what happens, and then kind of moving forward, what we'll continue doing. I know this was an item brought up by the board, wanted to discuss amongst each others, and didn't know if you had any questions for me, but I just wanted to provide you with, you know, what we've got on the books, and then I was going to let it go from there. If y'all wanted additional information, maybe something we could bring back to a workshop if you had questions, just a kind of a starting ground.
So we had talked with Bob about this, you know, reviewed some of our ordinance. These are ordinances, the erosion control and the watershed ordinance is our state ordinances that are modeled after the state ordinance. If you do change anything to those ordinances, it would need to go back and probably have a review at the state level. If we're going to change anything there, can be more stringent, as y'all know, like our watershed ordinance is. So
I think they amended that a few years ago, at the state level. Their water supply watershed ordinance. And I wondered if we had updated ours. I mean, I realize ours is incorporated into the UDO, is not a standalone ordinance.
I would have to see, I know with 160D, obviously there were updates all across the ordinance.
No, I meant from DEQ
Yeah, I don't
or
know.
DEW or whichever one it is that's doing it.
Yeah, I would have to check, but I can't recall us bringing the stormwater ordinance
I
or
don't-
watershed.
That's what either, but I do know that they amended the state ordinance, model ordinance a few years ago. And so I wondered if there was anything that we needed to look at, so that maybe it's something that you need to do
And I can bring that up with
and see if
one of the
we're still in
representatives.
compliance or anything else. I think they may have changed some of the definitions kind of things.
Okay,
That's what they were talking about at the county meeting. It was hard to figure out from the state to the county what they were saying.
yeah, I can look into that, and I'm sure there's someone with the DEQ, kind of like a Terry Fox when we did our floodplain updates a few months back, or I'm sure there's someone there that would be able to review it and tell us we're in compliance still with the state.
I just want to talk about the logistics of stormwater or the erosion control a little bit.
Okay.
You know, we have a land disturbing permit that doesn't kick in until it's an acre's worth of land. Is that correct?
Land disturbance kicks in over 3,000 square feet of disturbance.
Oh, okay.
It would be the erosion control plan that would, or an engineered erosion control stormwater plan that kicks in over an acre.
So they have to get a permit if it's over 3,000 feet.
And I typically,
3,000 square feet.
3,000 square feet of disturbance, they either have to get a letter in writing if it's under that, or typically I've just been giving the permit out because.
So in other words, I'm trying to figure out that we know that
Yes.
they need erosion control practices.
Yes, we
Okay.
do.
So if let's say they have 2,500 square feet of disturbance. Does that exempt them from putting up silt fences?
No, I would
They still
typically
have to
ask that
do
they
that.
still get a land disturbance form, tell us what they're doing, and ask that they install silt fence.
Okay.
But by the rule, under 2,500 square feet, they don't need a permit technically.
They don't.
But they have to provide a description letter that they're doing it.
Yes, and they would have to get, written
But it doesn't
permission from me.
exempt you from the other requirements in the Sedimentation Pollution Control Act.
No.
Well, that was my question, is
Yeah.
we know even small disturbances like that, we know that they're occurring. Okay, so that we can put it on the books and get it
Right.
looked at. The other question I had is, it talks about BMPs or best management practices. Why don't we require that they ditch and they bury the silt fence?
Well, typically, we're supposed to, whenever we check, make sure they've buried it. I believe it's 8 inches under, that they've buried it 8 inches under the ground. Now, obviously, there are areas, depending on where they're building, that it's hard to get it even that far into the ground because of rock or something like that, but
I see
typically
an
that's
awful lot of them that just leak like heck because they're not.
But, and it's also a visual thing. I think
Well,
sometimes
but-
it's like from 30 miles an hour, it looks like it's secure, but I mean, yeah.
But a lot of what we're talking about is, yes, there are people that just go out and knock
Nail-
the wooden stakes in the ground and walk
Right.
away. Not correct. And these projects, when they come up, now that we have
Actual
an
guy.
enforcement officer that can go and check them to check, hey, it's been 12 days, whatever, 14 days, 15 days. I need to go make sure it's all up before they start. He can check to make sure it's all actually ditched in, dug in, which I know he's done many, many, many times, just not necessarily for the town of Highlands. So, yeah, I mean, it goes back to being able to check it, that it was done right
Yeah.
before it blows out and you have an orange pond down the road,
Right.
which,
Which is what we see many times.
yeah, I mean, we've all seen them.
Yeah.
But so, because
Well-
when you read through these, my concern about it, the rules are here.
Mhm.
And I think personally they're good, because one point it was brought up, let's go to a half acre and get an engineered erosion control, et cetera. That was brought up, but that's a much, much bigger deal than you realize. Because half acre is every house. I mean, from a ground disturbance, if you count the driveways and the foundation, et cetera. And first off, getting enough engineers to even have that possible is one thing. Availability of
Well,
civil.
that's for stormwater.
Stormwater, that's what I'm saying. I think the acre is good. My point is, I'm more concerned about the fines when it happens. In my opinion, at least, and the ones I've talked to, grading contractors, if you follow this to the letter of the law, they don't have a problem with it. Because if it is an extreme case, if it was Helene, all bets are off. If it's a 1/4 inch of rain in 24 hours and you have a problem,
Yeah.
it should be a problem. I mean, it should be a problem for you as the contractor. But I think the fines need to ramp up. The first offense, I don't mind the fine, but I think after that, they should ramp up. Because because nobody's going to do anything until 3, 4, 5, 6 offenses down the road, it hurts. Because sometimes the fixes cost significantly more than paying the fines. And I think that's where we have our problem right now. That's just my experience. I know Eric's kind of in the business. He knows, and he knows they know how to do it right. But I drive by places constantly that are like, gosh, do I have to call Michael about this one? I mean, it's constant because they're not doing it right. So they need to have the teeth to make them fix it because the fine is going to be more expensive on the third offense than the fix.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You ride by and see that they're not doing it right. I'm trying to make sure they do it right from the beginning.
No,
Well, I think
well,
after they, township,
That's-
they'll learn.
right. I agree.
I mean, and they'll,
If the fines
they'll
are
start
there.
doing it.
So
right.
what is that though? Like that's.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's going to go back. I hate to put the pressure on a brand new employee, but the code enforcement officer is the one that's going to be able to find those things. Because
Right.
I mean, I only see these things because I'm going to other job sites. My job sites, I check it because I don't want to be known as the site that it happened and it's my project. But most 9 times out of 10, 99 out of 100 times, the contractor did it right to start with. But it's the ones that times are good here. We'll go up there and do work for 2 years. They blow the place up and then they head back to South Carolina or wherever I mean, you can have that happen all the time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
And it
trying
is
to
a little
avoid.
difficult up here because, I mean, we are a unique environment. This is just what we have to work with and stuff. So it does make it tough. But it's where if the town's proactive and getting out with the contractors and stuff and just making them aware of
Right.
what they need to do
And I
just
don't,
go above and beyond and
Yeah.
do it right the first time.
and I don't think we've been intentionally letting them buy with anything.
No.
We just needed a
But it does
position
happen.
filled to make it happen.
Yeah.
So,
But my concern, part of my concern was, as you see from Helene and all these little places, from Fairview to Burnsville to everywhere else,
Mhm.
is that you're talking about engineered stormwater
Mhm.
things. Sometimes they're very small and they impact somebody below them.
Mhm.
So some part of it is what slope, how steep the slope is that they are on.
Mhm.
So it may not just be 2,500 square feet or an acre or whatever it is that needs a stormwater engineered thing. Maybe it's slope.
well, the slope is mentioned in here. as one
Yeah,
of
we
the-
have the steep slope.
There's a sliding scale on the scope versus the requirements.
Right.
For the engineered stormwater or just for the,
For the stormwater. So if they hit I believe it's called an option 2, which is between 30 and 60% slope. They have to prove that there's no increase of surface runoff to adjacent or surrounding properties for the 2-year and 10-year 6-hour storm events. And
And-
also, go ahead, Jeff.
No, all I was gonna say is, now, a homeowner may not know that, but that's where, I mean, this gives you a little bit of discretion to where if it's 3/4 of an acre on a 50% slope, which is really,
no,
really steep.
no.
I mean, then
But
we can require
what
it,
I'm saying is,
correct?
Yeah.
I don't know what a 30% slope looks like. And is that adequate?
Most of Highlands. 30% is not as steep as you think. 30% is a gentle slope for Highlands.
Okay. Well,
50%
for
is hold
Highlands,
on to
but
trees
Highlands
to
is
get back
different
out.
than
Right,
every place else,
Yeah.
you know, so.
yeah. I mean, like 50 to 60% is literally as you're walking down the hill, you're holding on to small trees and branches. So you don't slip and fall.
50 to 60.
Yeah. 50 to 60 is steep.
Yeah, that's very steep.
Right, but what I'm saying is part of that, I think also is dependent upon our soils, and we have very erodible soils. So I was just, I mean, and I don't know, I'm just saying, I didn't know whether the 30% was an arbitrary thing, or we needed to look at something steeper or less steep, or those kind of things, because the last thing we want to do is have them slide down the mountain.
Right.
The 30s, like I say, pretty common here. It's what it is.
I know it's common,
Yeah,
but
I know,
that's
but
a
I mean,
number that
but
may
if they're
be
doing it- if they're
arbitrary
doing it-
without any science
Right, if
behind
they're
it.
doing it, their stabilization correctly to begin with on a 30%, it's usually adequate to mitigate any future.
Okay, because I'm not just talking about the sediment. I'm
Exactly.
talking about
The future.
the, from now on,
Correct.
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
that it
So
doesn't,
that
it
does
doesn't slide down
disperse
on the
out and
next,
stuff, and it's not like
further down the
concentrated,
mountain.
Runoff, so.
And I have a question. And as Jeff says, about everything's 30%, but I've noticed people are now building on really steep slopes. If they had, let's say, 3/4 of an acre and they're doing that, they would not have to have a stormwater retention plan.
They would, yes.
Why?
If they're over the 30%, they
Okay,
would
then it kicks
have to
in
prove, they would have
regardless.
to prove,
Right.
about the post runoff that's explained in that
Right,
steep.
okay. So,
Yeah, steep
so
slope
that
ordinance.
is the caveat. If you're on a real steep slope, doesn't matter what your acreage is, you've got to have that stormwater.
Yes, and if you
retention.
get over 60%, you gotta have stormwater and erosion control plan.
Okay,
Well, and that was my question, is 30% adequate? Because some of those slopes, I don't know what 30% looks like. And so, you know, and as I say, we have very erodible soils, and so our soils are different than, well, if you're on granite, that's one thing, but if you're, you know, if you're on soil that is slough, which is a lot of the mountains.
Right. But look at it this way, what, 1 in 12, you're at about 8% is a handicap ramp. I'm just telling you, that's pretty darn flat. So you get to 30%, it's still very walkable. It's very, I mean, if you get a 30% slope property,
No, it's 4 times steeper than a handicap ramp.
no, I understand that, but still it's not, but it's still not. What I'm saying is if you get a site like that to build a home, that is based on my experience, not only from an erosion control and storm drainage, that's a flat site.
30%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around here, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good normal site. If you find one less than that, that's, what I'm saying, I think the 30% is a good number. The
Okay.
question I have is it jumps from 30 to 60. Now, you know, somewhere in there, maybe therein lies a possible shift, but these again are potential, these are kind of set up by the state originally, and you can kind of take the good, better, best when you adopt it, because the state has different levels.
We could go.
Some, you know, I think if I'm not mistaken, our county just softened them in some areas having to do with fill. It was just the fill, am I correct?
Yeah, and
I'm looking at you because you were at the meetings too. Sorry to put you on the spot.
they didn't,
They softened the filling of those areas. Like you could put fill in those areas, which does affect downstream.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
that's.
so I'm not getting, let's not get into that. That's not us, but, because ours is actually, in some ways, like, you know, the town of Franklin is not as strict as the county was at the time in certain aspects, but in ours, you know, maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 45%. 45 is still pretty common. 45 or even 50% goes up an inch for every
Wait,
2
I
inches.
thought you said anything over 30%, we're going to require an engineered.
You can, you don't have to.
Oh,
I
I
guess
see.
about 60%.
If they can't prove that, if they can't prove it, that they're not gonna have an impact and a negative impact by how the water's dissipating and being run off, then we can require it between 30 and 60, correct me?
stormwater, yeah.
Stormwater. And over 60, they gotta have it,
So they can have an
of any size.
engineer give us a letter.
Yeah, they could, yeah, absolutely, just a letter without having a full plan.
Anybody remember Bronx and Riverwalk?
Yeah.
Well, I remember it, but that one's where the fines could have come in.
Yeah.
Because the fines, it was more expensive to fix than to pay the fines.
Yeah.
Michael, is there any, to Amy's point, is there any benefit to having something in a requirement on depth of soil? I mean, if you've got a 30% slope and the soil is on rock, essentially, you've got, 3 or 4 inches. The chances of that washing away are much greater than if it's not on rock, because water's always going to go to the rock. We all know that after the last couple of weeks. And it's going to take whatever is above it, especially in a situation like the last couple of weeks, it'll take whatever is above it with it.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know the answer to that.
Logistically, I have no idea how you would do that.
Well, do all job sites, they have to get soil test, soil? Okay.
No. And I have, like in my truck right now, I have a probe in the back of it and I go out and probe places and I'll find places with 12 inches and I'll find
Mhm.
places with 4 feet.
Yeah, if
So,
it could change
so what do
within
you-
like, yeah.
I mean, it can change from here
And
to
that's in like
Kim
2 feet,
and
2
be,
feet of difference.
yeah,
So-
yeah, it can, and actually can go the other way. It's very
Does the
strange.
county require a difference on footers or anything like that if you've got a shallow? I mean, say you've got 12 inches instead of 2 feet.
No,
You got penetrated rock.
actually, you pin to rock, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't have 12 inches of soil and solid rock below it without going to rock. But
But to that point, I think it would be beneficial to have something. Either we look at what we've got here and changes, or like you say, I mean, yeah, it varies across any slope. But if the majority of the slope is 3 inches of rock on soil,
Right.
and over here, it's you probe and it goes clear up to the handle, and you go in to get a permit or not get a permit, it's like, I had 36 inches of straight up dirt. It's not gonna move. Seem like we ought to be, because it's such a differentiating,
So 3 or 4 inch soils are more stable than your, probably your several feet. Because you have the root mass and stuff, they're holding your dirt together more than if you have deeper dirt.
Well,
Yeah,
because it
no
becomes
problem there.
saturated and expands and then slides.
It's
I
bigger.
mean,
area.
and our soils are, it's just,
Yeah, but
it is a crapshoot around here. It's tough.
Well, I understand that, but it's also the shallow soils that are going, in a rain and a wind. Those are the trees, those are the rhododendrons that are coming out.
Yeah, they're unstable, yes. But
I-
if it's natural land, undisturbed stuff, it's probably not going anywhere. It's shallower. Because you have the root mass and just the vegetation that is holding it together. Because
Yeah, no,
it's so shallow.
I
But if
agree
it
that
is
it's undisturbed, but what we're talking about is disturbing.
Yeah.
So if they're going in and taking out all of the stuff that's holding what's in place,
Yep.
then they are indeed creating the problem.
Yes.
The only other thing, I mean, when we first started talking about this, like I said, I was more interested in the fine side. I think the ordinance actually, as it's written, the biggest thing is, and I'm usually not a wait and see person because I usually, if I make a decision, that's what we're gonna do. Realize this is very different. But in this instance, we now have the enforcement side of it in place. And we're just now, I just don't want to knee jerk react to something that we hopefully in the next 6, 8 months can come back and look and say, we're not having the issues we were having because we have enforcement. Because I mean, and there's no knock on anybody. It's just we didn't have anybody to do that new erosion control, new storm drainage, et cetera. We knew if we had a problem, we reacted, but we were never proactive in looking at it and saying that's how it's supposed to be.
And that they routinely visit the job site, make sure compliance.
Right. And again, no knock on who's been doing it and how it's been being done, but it's been only reactionary. We have a problem, let's react and fix it. Well, that's part of the problem is the fact that the problem happened. And if we can avoid those problems, which I think the enforcement that we put into place to start that process. So now we can keep an eye on it. We can go check the active permits and we can, as we're driving to those active permits, we can pick up on the 3 that didn't get a permit. And we shouldn't be doing it without a permit. You can shut them down and make it happen. So, I mean, my feeling is at this point, and like I said, I'm usually not a wait and see person, but in this case, I think we wait and see and we watch what's going on and we check because I know we have problem. I'm sure there's particular people you need to watch more than others, but you watch all of them. The ones that are doing it right don't care at all that you're watching them. And then in 6 months, we reassess and come back. That's just my feeling. But I would like to revisit the fine aspect because I think that's the one area where we can get the people that aren't doing it right while we're kind of easing into, there's a couple roads, even where I live now, that I guarantee you, nobody drives down those roads except the 2 people going to the 2 houses or 3 houses that are down that road. And some of them, like I live in Wetmont, so it's right on Lake Sequoia. And I mean, there's been construction projects going on in some of them. There's been all kinds of stuff going on. And those are the ones that out of sight, out of mind, that I walk by their house, but I'd be willing to bet I'm one of 2 people that pass it.
Well, okay. One of the things I'm looking at though is like larger things like that create a lot of stormwater, that then they have it for their particular piece of land, a stormwater thing. But then they just say, okay, I'm going to just put it out on the road. And I'm speaking specifically of Bearmore and the Big Bear Pen Road and all that sedimentation that has come down because of that. And we've paved the road, or finally got the state to pave the road, which will help and put in actual storm drains and things like that. But we had to get the state to do that because that's a state road, okay? And before they did it, a heck of a lot of sediment came up and down that road. I mean, you just look at the lake and the ditch and going down Chestnut. You can see that's what it is. So what I'm saying is it gets engineered off their property. But when you have cumulative ones, that creates a problem, how do we address that?
Well, first off, I will note that the project across the street up here that we all just talked about, the steep slopes, that we had major problems and nothing got fixed and the fines ended up not even getting paid because they went bankrupt, et cetera. What we were just talking, what's the name of the?
Riverwalk.
Riverwalk.
Riverwalk, same contractor, did Bearmore.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and if we had been able to find the, out of him, things would have gotten fixed and things would have been done right. But the fines were cheap. Fine 'em. I mean, I'm just saying, it was the same contractor, so let's just, I mean, take that into account, that there are a significant number of people up here doing it right, and then projects like that and instances like that end up not being done right, and then everybody up here is doing it wrong. I'm just saying by public opinion, and I'm just, but in reality, I mean, I work with a lot of great contractors and we do not have these issues. We do not. I know, I'm just saying. That one
I
could have been
get that.
handled.
I don't dispute that at all. What
No.
I'm saying is
Right.
I want to try, stop it before it gets to the fine level.
Well, I understand that, but that's where the enforcement comes in.
Performance bonds.
Yeah, well,
How about
then
for you?
we're gonna have 10% of our contractors able to do business up here. You cannot get I'm just telling you the requirements for that. And it's a 3-year requirement. When you get done with the project, you have to do yearly filings for 3 years. You will have almost no contractors doing business in the town of Highlands if you require performance bonds. I'm just telling you. That's reality of it. And I hate to say that but it's reality. I mean, I'll be on the ABC store. We couldn't get anybody to bid on it because of performance bonds. And we have people that could qualify, just they're not going to deal with it. And everybody's going to do work outside the city limits, with the exception of a handful of people and charge twice as much. It's just the reality of it. But when we're talking about those projects, I think the enforcement aspect of it I mean, that job should have been shut down and there should be an arm to shut it down. And nobody does any work on until everything's fixed. Period. And that wouldn't have happened. The state wouldn't have had to come in and shoot new pipes across the road because it just kept building up, which they did, but they shouldn't have to. But that project is another one that is, unfortunately got a bad name because of a bad contractor, in my opinion. I represented the neighbors, so I know full well.
So what is it about a performance bond that you think is going to negate people from doing business?
Because there's a lot of people don't qualify for a performance bond. They don't have enough cash in the bank to get a
But
performance
what are we
bond.
talking about? What are you thinking?
Well, performance bonds are required for anybody that does, as far as what?
As far as the percentage or the flat fee, or, where you.
As far
why are
as
you
the
saying-
number, I don't know what the fines are now. I just know they're not much.
For erosion control,
It's $100.
actually, it's in the,
Yeah,
it's
I
in the
didn't.
thing, it actually
Fines
got,
themselves
Yeah.
are $100 per violation per day.
Yeah.
So what my recommendation would be
Exactly.
is to have a separate, that's zoning violations. So you could have a separate violation for erosion control, and that could start at 100, and it could double each time that they have a new
To
violation.
me, it can double per day. 100 to
Well,
200 to
you
400
gotta
to
be
800.
careful.
I mean,
You've got to
we-
be
Why would
careful.
it start at 100? Let's start at 500.
well, I think the reason because there are a lot of folks out there that end up getting, like, there's a problem. They had a problem overnight and then it rained a second time. And they didn't fix it that morning and they get a fine. The people that are doing a good job will fix it. And you're not going to have a truckload of silt down over the bank. And it could be 200, 500, whatever. It doesn't matter to me because, most of the good ones they're going to fix it within a day anyway. So they don't really care, but it needs to ramp up.
so. if I-
$100 a day, they'll pay it for the next 2 months rather than spend $20,000 to fix it and they spend 6 on fines. So
Well, I'm saying if you had one violation,
Just
and
that's
you
what's
hit them with $100 per day, they fixed it. You're beyond that, and they come back, a month later, and they have another violation, then it would step up, at that point. So, and then it would step up again and again and again. If we had the issue like we had on Mount Lori that, the complaint was, about, then by the fourth one, you would be up, like Jeff said, to $500 a day per violation because they had ramped up to that because they had multiple violations over the duration of the construction. What you have to be careful about, and I'll let Bob speak to this, is the same thing happened to Riverwalk. We lost Riverwalk because we put an arbitrary number out there. We didn't have any proof of how much sediment had entered Colossatia River. And when we went to court, they threw it out because we had no evidence. So you can look at red water and say sediment's going in there, but you've got
That's
to have
not-
proof of how much. And that's what happens. So you got to be careful with the fines. And Bob, you may want to mention something about that, but I feel like if you keep them low enough to where it gets in their pocket, but it doesn't go to the point where they're like, oh, I can't pay that. I'm going to have to go to court over this. I think that's the difference. Bob, do you have any comments on civil penalties?
So I'm not familiar with that situation, of course, but yeah, I think it is. I think Josh, you articulated a good question, which is what's the right balance? You want it steep enough to get compliance, which is what you're really after. But if it gets too steep, yeah, there's more of an incentive to fight it, and then you incur the legal cost of having to fight it. So where that line is, I don't know. That's your judgment is better than mine.
If I can jump in and out, the $100 a day regular zoning violation. But we also have, and I included it in that memo, and I could be off balance, but in determining the amount to assess for an erosion control and sedimentation issue, the board shall consider each of the following factors. Is it not, did we not change that with Riverwalk where the board determines the amount of fine or anything like that based on
There's about 4 criteria.
these factors? Is that for a failed erosion control plan, or is that erosion control anything if they're disturbing 3/4 of an acre and it starts leaving site? Is it,
That would probably be a development with an erosion control plan.
okay, I was wanting clarification on it.
What I'm saying, I feel like that if you've got a repeat offender, I would go up.
And I have to agree
But
with that.
I would be specific with, like right now, it's just zoning violation. Well, I think it needs to be, I think we need to say civil penalty schedule, zoning violations. I think it needs to step down. I think there needs to be something for signs, something for erosion control, something, if you wanted stormwater separate. I think it needs to spell out.
Rather than
in
just
each
a generic-
Rather than just.
a
zoning
generic incident,
violation.
yeah.
That could be anything in the UDO. I think we need to go out there, like, we do have something separate for tree removal. We've had issues in the past, people removing trees. So there's a $500, fine for removal of a tree without town approval. So, I think every violation, depending on the category, is different. It could be looked at differently. And then, first, second, third offense, for whatever could increase. I think it would be a good idea.
Well, but Mount Laurie brings up the problem of 2 lots next to each other, both of them being developed at the same time, and both of them contributing to stormwater runoff that was not being able to be handled. What do we do without that?
Well, after looking at that, that site and that development, some of it goes back on the development, the way it was originally developed. And we actually found a drainage pipe that was right above, between the 2 driveways, basically, that we didn't even know was there. Lamar didn't know it was there. We'd replaced some of the other pipes, which there's not but a couple of pipes in the whole development. But they had, the contractor had actually located it. They saw the end up underneath the pavement. So we have since then went back and replaced that pipe. So it actually takes a lot of that water that's coming in from above, and especially that upper side, and it takes it, disperses that out. So then you've got only the one side now contributing going down the hill. And Lamar said that, it would take some property owners getting together to look at maybe distributing that water down through there at different areas. I know he's talked to the property owners down there, but it after looking at it, I don't know if we have a real good solution yet of how to rid of it about halfway down the mountain. But, I think a lot of it is once the developments, and a lot of these developments been put in, as 40, 50 years ago, when there was 2 houses there, then 3, then 4, now you've got 20 houses all of a sudden, 6 of them being built within the last 2 or 3 years. all of a sudden, you're gonna have more stormwater, coming off those sites. And I think a lot of times you have to look, at each development separately, and maybe the development needs more drainage,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think retroactively, we're gonna have a hard time fixing some of these things, but we should learn our lesson going forward that these developments have to put in maximum amount of potential homes from the very beginning. They have to be able to handle the stormwater from all of it. And then I'm sure there must be some sort of calculation. We do, part of the problem is of course, we're having more intense rains now than we used to have. We used to have 24-hour drizzles. Now we have 3-hour, thunder boomers. So, and that impacts it too, because it all happens in 3-hour time period as opposed into and less of it soaks in, more of it is surface, runs off the surface. And so you have a lot of impacts. And I'm just trying to figure out, do we have enough in here for development, future, figure out what we do now because we're changing the amount of intensities that we have now? Or is that something that we need to re-engineer a lot of places?
I have a question. At what point, just remind me, because I don't remember the exact number, what size of property in a subdivision until retention kicks in?
Or,
Is it over 2 acres?
No, I think it's still,
Over 2.5?
thought it's still for stormwater?
No, just retention. Once in disturbed area, disturbed area. Is it still, if it's over an acre? Or,
I think it
okay.
is.
Over an acre, then you got to have retention on property.
You mean like a retention pond, what you're saying?
I think so. Is that
well,
right?
now in commercial.
Is it acre?
It's 8,000 square
Yeah.
feet or more.
No, I know,
Yeah.
I was talking
And I
about
think
residential.
it is an acre for residential, yes.
Okay, so if there's over an acre, so like I said, every one of these projects that requires the stormwater has to have retention, which is huge in dealing with what you're talking about. And then it does, I'm sure somewhere, somehow it requires, well, when an engineer does it, they require how often it has to be cleaned out.
Yeah.
And then the key is having it being monitored by them because they're they're responsible, so. Okay, I just didn't remember the number.
Is it, and that's for residential also?
Residential's an acre, commercial's 8,000.
So
Square feet.
it's,
And it may be different, Michael, and I can't recall the grade. A certain amount of grade may require retention. I'm not sure.
Goes into
Remember,
that.
we've done that before.
Yeah, that option too, I believe, between the 30 and 60%.
It's really site specific, and I know there's one on the country club that actually we required retention a number of years ago. But it had a lot of water coming, like spring water coming down the steep grade into the middle of the lot. So the lot itself was set up to wash away. So they put a large retention area under the parking area, capture that, and then slowly release it. We were up there the other day in all that hard rain, and it was rolling out of that, drainage system at a high rate, and it builds up in there and comes through like holes in that
Like our
retention device.
egg crate thing under Kelsey Hutchison.
yeah,
Where
Yeah.
is it?
yeah, same thing.
Okay, we have 5 minutes
I-
before 7.
I had one more thing.
Okay, bring it up.
This is on the water supply watershed.
You're talking about.
When we first passed this in like, I don't know, mid-90s sometime, 95? sometime?
93, I think
93?
it is, watershed, 93.
The states was approved in 93, so it's probably around 95 by the time.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I knew it was mid-90s or somewhere when we were doing that. At that time, our intake was just Big Creek. Our intake is now Whole Lake, which means 95% of our town is actually in our water supply watershed, and we've changed the water supply maps, the critical area and balance of the watershed and that kind of thing. One of the problems I have with our UDO is that we only require the 30-foot setback or whatever it is, depending on whether you're in the balance of watershed or in the critical area, on streams that are blue lined on the topo maps. We have a lot of streams that are constant streams that we don't do the blue line. And my question was, I guess, is can we say any stream that's not a ephemeral stream or an intermittent stream can we impose that? Because a lot of the sediment is coming from people basically developing right up to these basically perennial streams. And that
It's a-
that
I mean, it's
happens
a-
on Bear Pen
It's a good
can't-
question because I
Yeah.
mean, I've been asked that this week about people wanting to develop a garage beside a really intermittent stream, that's not identified on the, topo maps like you suggested, or the surface water classification maps.
I forgot to bring my topo with me, but I mean, there are some significant streams around here that aren't blue lined.
Well, that stream that I'm talking about feeds right into the Colasage River. And I mean, I don't know what the classification is. There's a survey on it and that, I'm not gonna bring
It's
up
gotta
that
be
whole
written down.
specific case, but that's a great question because it's something we're asked a lot. And really, I, like with this one, it's new. And if they want to talk to the Division of Water Quality and
But
figure out a
Well-
different delineation.
I can tell you what Diener and Army Corps says, is they're not regulated. I mean, if it's not on there, they don't regulate them either.
But that's what I'm saying.
Oh.
They don't regulate them, but it's important to us
De-
because it's in our water supply
Diener
watershed.
Diener and Army Corps.
But I thought that we had the option of making more strict plans, just not less strict plans, requirements. Because, you know, obviously the Piedmont and the coastal plain is going to be different for their water supply watershed than the mountains are. You know, and everything feeds into our lakes. And part of it is the sediment that then reduces our capacity. Because our ponds now, or our impoundments now act as sediment accumulators. And we're paying $10 million. And one of our sediment accumulators dredged. Or the state is paying $10 million. So I think there's enough that we should be actually looking at these streams they're constant streams. And not only that, they are headwater streams, extremely important ecologically, pollutant wise, everything else that we should be trying to protect, not just our drinking water supply, but our streams. And that was a question that I had, because basically, if you look at what it's blue lined on the topo map, although most people can't even get topo maps anymore, or on a soil map or something, some places, they just don't have the stream. And it's been there forever.
And we can talk to water quality about that.
And it seems to me, wrapping this up, staff will revisit this whole issue with fine structures possible and other refinements that we've been talking
And
about.
we can bring it back to a workshop as well, what we found.
Right.
With the fines, obviously, there's probably other
Okay.
jurisdictions doing things. I know we're short on time. As we've touched to it, as Jeff has, Bobby Henry's our new code enforcement officer. He'd worked for Macon County for a little over 3 years, done building and fire code inspections with him. And he's also experienced and done erosion control inspections with him as well. Obviously, we're talking about that tonight, so we're happy to have Bobby aboard.
We certainly are. We're
Yes.
glad you're with us, Bobby.
Yep.
And I know you've been taking all this in.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?